Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So there was an update to the previous server with a bunch of upcoming class changes that we can look forward to, potentially coming next week. Tuesday or Thursday, the usual updates days. You can see a brief breakdown here from Dreadnought on what's changing. A bunch for the Rogue, Cleric, Fighter, very good stamina improvement for Barbarian+Warlock, also the new Fighter ability, and then we have a new test artifact we can use to help simulate if there was a full artifact call. More on that later. But let's jump into the details. First, let's cover Rogue. I'll put timestamps on the play bar below. You can skip to any section you're most interested in. So, the Rogue is getting a bunch of updates to both its stealth regeneration and its damage. The first set here, we see Path of Blades, Smoke Bomb, universal powers between both Aragon paths getting updated there. Unfortunately, Smoke Bomb will be having a reduction on its hit count. Cooldown's gone down massively and the damage total has just gone up. Also, they seem to just have decided to increase Path of Blades damage a little bit as well. It is a bit of a nerf to the combination where you used Smoke Bomb and Shadowy Opportunity plus like Enchanters Hex. But more on Enchanters Hex a little bit later, as that will be getting reworked entirely. But moving on, we get the first adjustment to our stealth regeneration. Tenacious Concealment is now having plus 50% stealth regeneration. What this actually means is right here in the math. Your usual stealth regeneration time, the time it takes to go from having no stealth, just used it, to going to full stealth, is that 12.5 seconds. Now when you add that 50%, you use this fancy math and you end up with 8.33 seconds instead. So that's very nice. A pretty significant boost then if you're to use that feature. However, that is not the only thing changing. And we're going to go into Aragon paths now specifically. We're going to jump to the Whisperknife. Here we end up with all of these changes. We start out with Vengeance Pursuit, this encounter power which may have been an eyesore for many of you players as of late. It would cause basically a white orb to be on your screen for a little bit of time. However, its follow-up magnitude hit has been increased, but it no longer will be able to hit twice. But we move on to Lurker's Assault, the daily power. This is getting its boost to damage increased up to 40%. Moving on, Razor Action. Yeah, sad to see this got absolutely gutted, and I don't think it's in its final state. Basically, it got its magnitude increased, yes, but now it acts as a single target power. It cannot hit more than one target. Also, it cannot critically hit. To confirm, Razor Action is supposed to be like a multi-target hit. It's not supposed to just hit one target. They will work on fixing it. As for it not critting, well, they decided to increase the magnitude instead of fixing that. Hidden Attacks feat, just entirely reworked, is going to give 50% stealth regeneration instead of reducing your stealth drain. Having that plus 50% is massive. Again, you can stack it with like Tenacious Concealment and have 100% stealth regen, and we'll talk how that all combines a little bit later. Moving on, we have one with the Shadows feat. This got improved. Basically now has a 12-second cooldown instead of 15, and the damage buff of 5% will last 12 seconds instead of 10. But I think the paired feat, which did get updated a bit, Return to Shadows, can be more useful just for stealth regeneration. It did get nerfed in how it was acting before, but it was pretty powerful, but it'll still be pretty good. Additionally, it's got its tooltip updated to be more clear on how it works. So when you activate an encounter power, for each target you hit, you refill 7.5% of your stealth. This used to be set at 15%, but the devs weren't aware that it could do that per target hit. And so when you're behind your target, it'll regenerate 10% instead of 7.5%. So improved, but that's down from what it was at like 20%. So yeah, there's a nerf there, but that's balancing and it's still okay, especially with the stealth regen we now have. And we'll again talk about that a little bit later. We now have the Shadowy Opportunity feat, and unfortunately this got a pretty heavy nerf. Right now on the live server, it actually just got increased to 250, which was kind of a mistake, but they had to go ahead with the patch anyway. But it's getting reduced to 150. It is a bit of a reduction, but it still means that this can hit off every single attack you do. That is an at-will or an encounter or daily power. So it's very useful to basically rack up all that damage. Smoke Bomb becomes 1000 magnitude. Path of Blades becomes over 1000 magnitude combined with that. And that's just passive damage over time while you can be casting some at-wills. And each of them getting plus 150 magnitude. So it's still powerful, and Shadow of Demise didn't get touched. But that's all the Whisperknife updates. We're going to move over to the Assassin here. Now it just got some minor updates. With stealth regeneration, we have Gloaming Cut. It now provides plus 50% stealth regeneration. And Master of the Shadows feat did get reworked, so it will now give that plus 50% like the other things. For Assassin, the main time you'll use it is probably stealth for Lashing Blade or stealth for Wicked Reminder. And that's it at this point. You might be able to squeeze out if you're using like Gloaming Cut plus Masters, and even if you have Tenacious Concealment, be able to have stealth twice so that you can use it between having Lashing Blade. But ultimately how this all then works together is this with the stealth regen rework. So your base regen time is 12.5 seconds, and then powers and abilities can add plus 50% stealth regen to stack up and reduce as the following depending on the total. So if you have 50%, that's 8.33 seconds to get your stealth back to full. If you have 100%, that's 6.25 seconds. And if you have 150%, that's 5 seconds to get your stealth back to full. Additionally, this is actually really important. You will no longer lose any stealth when you receive damage. This is a huge buff for anything stealth related in any content where you were taking damage over time. It was absolutely horrible to have that. So this is really good for the rogue now, especially on the Whisperknife, to not have to worry about that stealth ever getting drained. It's gone. That feature out of the game. But overall, a bit of a nerf to Whisperknife with regards to Shadowy Opportunity and Smoke Bomb only hitting 4 times. But it does have a much lower cooldown. So now we move to Cleric. It has some Arbiter updates. Your Daunting of Light, its radius is going from this size, as you can see here, we cast it a few times, to now this size. This is going from 8 feet to 12 feet. Those Dauntings look hella good compared to how they were before. This is the size Zariel has. It's a bit of a visual update as well, as the previous model showed the radius to be a bit smaller with the animation circle like this effect, and this will now be bigger. You can see that right there with the changes. Additionally, your Chains of Blazing Light, that encounter power to restrain targets, will basically not break its restrain effect when you hit your targets. So you have a 5-second restrain and you'll put that on them, and when you hit them they'll still remain restrained. Well, if you kill them, you kill them. You get the idea. So that's a bit of an improvement there, especially with the radius of Daunting Light being increased. Very useful for multi-target damage there on the Cleric. They'll definitely appreciate that. Moving on, we go to the fighter Dreadnought, who just got a bunch of updates and had some bugs to fix. And well, first of all, Trip Attack, which adjusts the damage of Kneebreaker if you have the Vengeance to improve it. This is supposed to be 1300 magnitude, but it was only 130. Somebody forgot a 0. So they've gone and fixed that now, so it'll properly deal that 1300 magnitude. It will also, just to note, proc Enchanters Hex twice, so it's very useful to use, but again, Enchanters Hex will be going under some updates, which we'll discuss later on in the video. Now you can see everything here with the changes. They also have a stamina adjustment, so when you use some stamina to like gain immunity frames and a boost or to animation cancel, you will gain that stamina back 1 second faster. It used to have a 2-second delay. It'll now just be 1 second. Additionally, Executioner's Cut feat and Land Waster feat, they both won't drain Vengeance based on per target hit. They'll just drain it based on activation. This was pretty bad for Executioner's Cut, as you were ending up losing like 20, 30, 40 vengeance, depending on how many enemies you were hitting with a multi-target power to trigger this. And then with Land Waster, you were draining all your vengeance. Even if you're at 100, you hit 2 guys, you'd be at 0, rather than only at 50. So just some improvements there. Just be aware, Executioner's Cut's not as good as it seems. Unfortunately, it has the ability to refresh the duration by using another encounter power. So if I'm to go use 3 encounters back to back, like 1, 2, 3, my Executioner's Cut will still have 2 seconds remaining. It's a bit sad, rather than it triggering 3 times because I used 3 encounters. I would like them to change it so it can stack, but we'll see. Moving on to Barbarian and Warlock. They both have the same stamina changes. So when you dash around the place or use stamina for animation cancelling, you will start to regain that stamina 1 second after you finished using it, rather than a 2-second delay. This is really good. That's the same for the Warlock and their Shadow Slip ability. Ultimately, we return back to Enchanters Hex, as I was saying I was going to mention. This ability, whenever you hit a control immune enemy with an encounter or daily control ability, you should deal 100 extra magnitude damage. And well, this is a bit of a balance issue, because some classes are taking advantage of that a lot more than others. Wizard with their Ray of Frost can trigger it on every single hit. So, Brett Norton finally said they were going to look at revising it. Their first iteration would be something like this. Remove the encounter and daily power thing from the tooltip and apply a 1-second cooldown on it. This makes everything that would trigger it intended. So that would kind of solve that, but it still then has balance issues. So they made a second iteration, and that is this right here. Basically, it's no longer going to work against CC immune enemies, only against soft targets who are not control immune. This means it's going to end up being only useful against lots of enemies. However, they seem to want to keep the 1-second trigger time, which might just make it useless then. I mean, it'll still be a teeny bit useful, but ultimately they'd have it changed so apply a control effect to a target and deal 100 magnitude damage. I think this is a good way to balance it, because having it in single target, having it so that different classes can trigger it with different things, is very unbalanced. Some classes are always going to be better than others at triggering it, and thus gaining that extra damage boost. Changing it to only work against mobs, enemies which are controllable, is a good thing in my opinion, because that takes it away from the seriousness of endgame content and the balancing. You're just looking at multi-target content, which is never a big deal. It's a mess with regards to class balance anyway. I don't think they're ever going to get multi-target damage down perfect in terms of balance, because every multi-target fight is going to be different. Some classes are going to be good when enemies are spread out. Some classes are going to be good only when they're grouped up tightly, etc, etc. Lots of different scenarios, different fights, and certain classes are going to be better than others in certain situations. So with Enchanters Hex, make sure you're not relying on it too heavily, and be aware that it could very well be changing. Don't go and buy a mount and a bunch of insignias to try and get that just now. Expect it to change. So let's move on to a new artifact that they brought out just for testing purposes, the Buffer. Basically, this is to simulate an artifact call, and my oh my does it make you pretty powerful. What it's going to be able to do is basically increase your damage by 25%, increase the target's damage taken by 175%, reduce their defense awareness and critical avoidance by 10%, and that lasts 10 seconds with a 10-second cooldown. It is, pretty fun to test with, I must say. You go cast it, and then pretty much all your hits are, doubled, tripled, and you're just dealing an absolute ton of damage. Quite fun, and you could definitely do some amusing testing with this in terms of the content here. doing some training runs on the preview server, yeah, have somebody slot this and feel free to mess around how easily you can kill everything. A bit of fun, and it can be very helpful to help simulate an artifact call when you're just by yourself, say in this training room, and you want to see what kind of damage you're going to be dealing in burst under the scenarios of having those debuffs and not. Because some classes are particularly good at burst damage, others are better at sustained damage, and you look at particularly an Arbiter, if they aren't taking advantage of these artifact calls, they be falling down in damage like drastically. Anyway, that's it for this video. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up on what's coming with future updates, certain class balancing things, and what to expect moving forward. Be aware of those bugs on Fighter, and they will be getting addressed soon. Stealth regeneration getting entirely reworked. And again, we're going to have to look at Whisperknife. How effective will it be? I think it would still be pretty strong, especially in multi-target content in like the Moon Dancer. But moving to single target purely, you might want to be looking at Assassin. I'll have to do some comparisons there, and I'll keep you guys posted. Massive thank you again to all these channel members for their added support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.